There is a man in Chengdu named Luo. He is 57 years old. He supports a wife, a daughter, elderly parents, and 2 sisters on a single public sector salary in one of China's most expensive cities. And every month, no matter what happens, no matter if the economy dips, no matter if prices rise, no matter if his investments bleed, he puts away exactly half of his household income, not into stocks, not into crypto, not into anything that promises to double overnight, into a savings account that barely keeps pace with inflation. When a reporter asked him why, he did not quote a financial guru. He did not mention a budgeting app. He said 6 words that have haunted me since the moment I read them. This is how we manage the unknowns. Save. Now hold that sentence. Because on the other side of the world, the average American saved 3.8% of their disposable income in 2024, according to the Bureau of Economic Analysis. 3.8%. That means for every $100 earned, 96 disappeared. Not into the future, into the present, into subscriptions, convenience fees, impulse purchases, and things that stopped mattering before the credit card statement arrived. China's gross savings rate, 43% of GDP. The World Bank has tracked it for decades. It is not a new trend. It is not a government trick. It is a cultural operating system that has been running for over 2,000 years, and it was not designed for the wealthy. It was designed by philosophers who had nothing and built everything from that nothing. So here is the question that should make you deeply uncomfortable. Why does the nation that earns less per capita save more, while the nation that earns the most saves almost nothing? The answer is not income. It is not luck. It is philosophy. And today you are going to learn the exact system behind it, a system that does not require a high salary, a financial advisor, or a single dollar spent on tools. All it requires is a shift in how you see money itself. Shift. If that shift is what you have been looking for, subscribe to Quiet Mandate right now and drop a comment telling me, what is the one purchase you made this month that you already regret? Be specific. That specificity is the first cut of the blade. Now let us begin. The lie you were trained to believe. Every modern financial system teaches you the same lesson in different packaging. Earn more, and your money problems disappear. Get the raise, land the promotion, start the side hustle. The 50-30-20 rule says spend 50% on needs, 30 on wants, 20 on savings. Clean, elegant, and for anyone earning below the median income, completely useless. If 75% of your paycheck vanishes into rent, food, and transportation before you touch it, a rule that assumes 30% of your income is available for wants is not advice. It is mockery, dressed in a spreadsheet. But the deeper lie is not the math. The deeper lie is the assumption underneath it, that the problem is how much you earn. In 2013, Harvard economist Sendhil Mullainathan and Princeton psychologist Eldar Shafir published research demonstrating that scarcity itself, the feeling of not having enough, hijacks cognitive bandwidth. It makes decision-making worse. It narrows focus. It creates a tunnel where the only visible option is the immediate one. Their work, cited over 450 times, showed that poverty is not just an economic condition. It is a psychological tax. And every mainstream budgeting system ignores that tax entirely. 2,400 years ago, a Chinese philosopher named Mozi wrote 2 chapters in his collected works titled Jieyong, Moderation in Expenditure. His argument was radical for his era, and it is radical now. When a sage governs, in using resources, he does nothing that does not add to utility. See, therefore resources are not wasted. Mozi was not speaking to emperors. He was the son of a craftsman. He walked barefoot between warring states, eating simple food, wearing coarse cloth. His philosophy of frugality was built from the ground up, by a man who had no wealth and refused to pretend that wealth was the prerequisite for financial order. Utility, not income, was the unit of measurement. Every coin spent had to answer a single question. Does this serve a function, or does it serve a feeling? That question is the hinge. And the system you are about to learn is built entirely around it. Principle 1. Zhi. Know when you have enough. Tao Te Ching. Chapter 33. 5 Chinese characters that have outlasted every economic theory ever written. Zhi Zhu Zhe Fu. Zhi Zhu Zhe Fu. He who knows he has enough is rich, not he who has the most. C. Not he who earns the highest, he who knows what enough looks like and stops reaching past it. This is not motivational poetry. This is a financial instruction. Because the single most destructive force in personal finance is not debt, not interest rates, not inflation. It is hedonic adaptation, the psychological phenomenon where every new level of spending becomes the new baseline of normal. In 2011, researchers Joseph Chancellor and Sonia Lyubomirsky published a study in the Journal of Consumer Psychology titled Happiness and Thrift When Spending Less is Hedonically More, cited 197 times. Their finding was devastating in its simplicity. People who spend less on repeated pleasures derive more happiness from those pleasures over time. The act of restraint does not reduce joy. It protects joy from becoming invisible. Lao Tzu said it 25 centuries before the study was published. The mechanism he described was not economic, it was perceptual. Chapter 12 of the Tao Te Ching. The 5 colors blind the eye. The 5 flavors dull the taste. The more you consume, the less you feel. The less you feel, the more you need. And the more you need, the less you keep. Zhi Zhu is the circuit breaker. Here is how to install it. Tonight, take a piece of paper. Write down every recurring expense in your life. Next to each one, write the answer to one question. If this disappeared tomorrow, would my life actually get worse? Or would I simply notice for a week and then forget? The expenses that survive that question are needs. The ones that do not survive it are ghosts. Charges that exist because you forgot to cancel, not because you chose to keep. Find that between 15 and 30% of their monthly spending is ghosted, alive on a bank statement, dead in actual function. That is not a budgeting trick. That is Zhu Zhu. You are not cutting expenses. You are discovering what enough actually costs, and the gap between what you thought you needed and what you actually need is the first money you have ever truly saved. Principle 2. Xian Chouji. Save before you spend. In 1926, George S. Hugh Clayson published The Richest Man in Babylon and introduced the Western world to a concept he called pay yourself first. The idea was framed as Babylonian wisdom, but the principle existed in Chinese household culture long before Clayson put it on paper. For generations, Chinese families, particularly those in lower-income rural communities, practiced what is called Xian Chouji, first set aside, then arrange the rest. The savings did not come from what was left over. The savings came first. What remained was the budget. This sounds impossible when income is low. It is not. It is a sequence change, not a quantity change. If you currently spend first and hope to save from the remainder, you are feeding every external demand before feeding your own future. Xian Chouji reverses the order. Even if the amount is trivially small, $5, $3, $1, the act of removing it before any spending occurs rewires 2 things simultaneously: the psychological hierarchy of your money and the bandwidth problem that Mullainathan and Shafir identified. When savings is the first action, the scarcity tunnel narrows around a slightly smaller pool, and the mind adapts. When savings is the last action, it never happens, because the tunnel already closed. In the Sixth Tone's 2025 report on Chinese saving behavior, 27-year-old Li Rui described his transformation. When he earned 30,000 yuan a month from multiple jobs, he saved roughly 20%, if that. When his income dropped to 5,000 yuan as a full-time PhD student, he began saving over 60%. His explanation: for me, that sense of security is the greatest value of saving. It is the foundation for a more certain future. His income fell by 83%. His savings rate tripled. The variable that changed was not income, it was priority. Open your banking app, set up an automatic transfer, pick a number that feels almost insultingly small, small enough that your rational mind cannot argue against it. 5% of your next paycheck, transferred the day it arrives, into an account you do not touch. That is Xian Chouji. You are not building wealth yet. You are building sequence, and sequence is the skeleton that wealth eventually grows around. If you are still here, you are already thinking differently than you were 4 minutes ago. That shift matters. Hit the like button, not for me, but because this video needs to reach the people who have been told that being broke is their fault. It is not their fault. It is their system, and the system is about to change. Let us keep going. Principle 3. Jieyong. Eliminate what adds no function. Back to Mozi. Chapter 20 of the Mozi. Jieyong. Moderation in expenditure. What is the purpose of clothing? To ward off cold in winter and heat in summer. Whatever adds warmth in winter or coolness in summer is acceptable. Whatever does not add to this, eliminate it. He applied the same test to housing, to weapons, to transportation. Not, is it nice? Not, does it look good? One question, does it function? This is not minimalism. Minimalism is an aesthetic choice made by people who can afford to own less because they already own too much. Jieyong is an economic discipline designed for people who cannot afford to waste a single coin on something that does not work. The distinction matters because minimalism asks, does this spark joy? While Jieyong asks, does this serve a purpose? Joy is subjective and expandable. Purpose is binary and finite. One of those questions protects your money, the other one lets it leak. Here is the practice. Once a week, for 10 minutes, review the last 7 days of transactions. For each one, apply Mozi's test. Did this add function to my life, or did it add feeling? There is no shame in the answer. Some feelings are worth paying for. But the ones that delivered a 5-second dopamine hit and left nothing behind. The vending machine purchase, the impulse add-on at checkout, the upgrade you clicked because the button was orange and the word was premium. Those are the expenditures Mozi would strike from the ledger. Not because pleasure is wrong, but because unfunctional spending in a low-income life is a wound that bleeds quietly, and the person bleeding rarely notices until the account is empty. Seng Chu. Principle 4. Fengguan. Divide the stream into jars. In traditional Chinese households, particularly in Fujian, Guangdong, and rural Zhejiang, money was physically divided the moment it entered the home, not metaphorically, literally. Coins and small bills went into separate containers, one for food, one for rent, one for medicine, one for education, one untouched and hidden. The jars were visible, the amounts were fixed, and crucially, money placed in one jar was dead to every other jar. If the food jar ran low, the family ate simpler meals. They did not raid the education jar. The boundary was physical, which made it psychological. Modern behavioral economics calls this mental accounting. Richard Thaler won a Nobel Prize in part for documenting how humans irrationally treat money differently depending on which mental category it occupies. But the Chinese grandmothers who invented the jar system were not being irrational. They were exploiting the same cognitive tendency deliberately, using the brain's natural tendency to compartmentalize as a budgeting tool rather than a flaw. For a low-income household, this is one of the most powerful systems available because it requires zero technology and zero sophistication. 4 envelopes, 4 labels, survival needs, recurring bills, small reserves, untouchable savings. Divide the income on the day it arrives, after the Xianqiuji savings transfer, and commit to one rule. An envelope is a boundary, not a suggestion. If the food envelope runs low on day 25, meals get simpler for 5 days. You do not open another envelope, you adapt. And that adaptation, week after week, trains the most important financial muscle a human being can develop. The ability to tolerate short-term discomfort in exchange for long-term stability. Principle 5. Fan. Return to the source. Tao Te Ching, Chapter 16. All things flourish, but each one returns to its root. Returning to the root is called stillness. Lao Tzu called this principle fan, the return. In financial terms, it means something uncomfortable. When spending spirals, when debt accumulates, when the financial picture becomes chaotic, the answer is not a new strategy. The answer is a retreat to the most basic version of your economic life. What is the true minimum you need to survive for 30 days? Not the comfortable minimum, not the I deserve minimum, the actual, Biological, shelter and food minimum. Most people have never calculated this number because calculating it feels like failure. It is not failure, it is the foundation. Because once you know the floor, the genuine, stripped-down floor, every dollar above it becomes visible for the first time. And money you can see is money you can direct. FAN is practiced once every 3 months. You sit down and recalculate your floor. You account for any changes. A rent increase, a new medication, a shift in transportation cost. You acknowledge the floor without resentment, and then you measure the distance between the floor and your actual income. That distance, however small, is the space where choice lives, where Zizou defines what enough looks like within that space, where Xian Chouji claims the first slice, where Jie Yong eliminates the waste, where Fen Guan divides what remains into protected categories. The 5 principles are not separate tools, they are one system. And that system functions identically whether your income is $2,000 a month or $200,000. The only thing that changes is the size of the numbers. The architecture stays the same. The real cost of not having a system. In 2024, the Federal Reserve published its annual survey of household economics and decision-making. The finding that should disturb every person watching this. 45% of American adults said they could not cover an unexpected $400 expense without borrowing or selling something. Not 4,000, 400. In the richest country in the history of the world, nearly half the population is one car repair, one emergency room visit, one broken appliance away from financial crisis. Meanwhile, in China, the share of people who prefer saving over spending has stayed above 50% every single quarter since 2020. In the final quarter of 2024, that number climbed to 61.4%, according to a People's Bank of China survey. That is not a wealthy elite hoarding cash, that is an entire culture, including students on 5,000 yuan bursaries and restaurant workers on modest wages, choosing to build a floor beneath their feet before building a ceiling above their heads. The difference is not intelligence. It is not discipline in the way Westerners define discipline, as white-knuckling your way through temptation. The difference is philosophical. One culture was taught to earn its way out of scarcity. The other was taught to structure its way through scarcity. One requires a raise, the other requires a decision. Chapter 44 of the Tao Te Ching asks, name or self, which is closer? Self or wealth, which means more? Gain or loss, which is the greater bane? 2,500 years, and the question has not changed. Only the number of people ignoring it has. Your 30-day path. Here is the implementation. No apps, no spreadsheets, no paid tools. Week 1. Practice Zizou. Audit every recurring expense. Eliminate the ghosts, the charges that serve no function. Calculate what enough actually costs you per month. Write that number down and put it where you see it daily. Week 2. Activate Xian Chouji. Set the automatic transfer. Even 1%. Even $5. The amount is irrelevant. The sequence is everything. Week 3. Introduce Fen Guan. Divide your remaining income into 4 envelopes or 4 sub-accounts. Label them. Honor the boundaries. If one runs low, adapt. Do not redistribute. Week 4. Apply Jie Yong. Review the week's spending against Mozi's function test. Strip what fails the test. Keep what passes. Shame. No guilt. No shame. Just utility. At the end of 30 days, perform FAN. Return to the source. Recalculate your floor. Measure the distance. And begin the cycle again, knowing that the system now runs beneath your decisions, like a current beneath a river, invisible and constant. The man in Chengdu, Luo, told the reporter one more thing. He said, even if interest rates drop all the way to 0, I will still put aside half our income. I know it will lose value, but this is how we manage the unknowns in life. It has become a habit. Our way of staying steady when things get unpredictable. He did not learn that from a book. He did not learn it from a course. He learned it from a culture that decided, 2,000 years ago, that the purpose of money is not pleasure. It is not status. It is not freedom in the abstract. The purpose of money is to build a floor solid enough that when the unknowns arrive, and they always arrive, you are still standing. You now have the system. Not a theory, not a mindset, a system. 5 interlocking principles tested across 25 centuries and 600 million households. The only question left is whether you will use it or scroll past it. If this changed something in the way you think about money, subscribe to Quiet Mandate. Share this with someone who needs it, someone who has been told their income is too low to save, because that is the most dangerous lie in personal finance. And leave one comment below. Name the first ghost expense you are cutting tonight. Not tomorrow, not payday, tonight. Because Lao Tzu did not say, "He who plans to know enough will eventually be rich." He said, "Zhu zhu 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 fu." He who knows. Present tense, right now. The floor is built one coin at a time. Start building.